Today I'll be sharing a presentation on evangelism in the Western world. When looking at evangelism in the Western world, it's hard not to notice the desperate need and urgency for Christians to reach out and evangelize. The emerging generation know that the church exists. However, many haven't heard the name Jesus or haven't seen what it is or why do we need to be saved by him. McCrindle Research in Australia has taken the census of Australia in 2011 and done some research on the decline of the church over the last century, the last 100 years. And so this is stats relating to Australia alone, not the whole Western world, but a key part of the Western world, and which is influenced by the rest of the Western world. So in Australia alone, we have seen a dramatic shift in terms of people who would call themselves a Christian over the past century. According to the 2011 census, McCrindle says Christianity is down 22%. Church attendance is down 48%. No religion is up 269%. And the average age of a Christian here in Australia is 53 years old. When looking at evangelism in the Western world, I believe that a big issue is that the people are looking for Christianity through both word and deed. That it's not just people talking about Jesus, but they want to see a transparency in the way people live. They want to see that people are practicing what they're preaching in terms of the Jesus they speak of and talk about. Some Christians in the Western world consider evangelism to be all about proclaiming vocally the rule and reign of God. Timothy Keller proposes that in order for evangelism to be most effective, it is vitally important that it is done through both word and deed. Proclaiming with your voice your love for God, and also following it up in the way we practically love those around us who aren't in a relationship with Jesus. Keller stresses the point that it is critical that these two forms of evangelism are integrated in all believers. If one is only concerned about proclaiming Jesus through words, some will see this as though Christians are only concerned about advancing their own tribe or building their own church up in numbers. Evangelism that is also followed through with deeds shows compassion for that person, and that the love of Christ has shown us is overflowing in the actions of that believer. It is all well and good for us to tell people that they need Jesus and proclaim the good news story of rescue and grace for all. However, if this is not matched up with the deeds, through compassion, through action, it's hard for a non-believer to experience this Jesus you're speaking of. This generation is crying out of an experience of Jesus, not just to hear, but to experience, to see and experience this transformative power. Keller gives us an example of a single mother. You can kind of picture it. This mother is absolutely exhausted raising these kids on her own. She's trying to keep up with the demands of motherhood all alone, and she's got this one son who has to get to soccer practice. She has a Christian friend who's involved in the church, and instead of offering a practical support to this mother, she tries telling this mum about all these great programs at her church, that if only she added this one more program into her life, it would make everything better. I think it's pretty clear to see that actually the best thing this lady from the church could have done in this situation is simply to show practical kindness, generosity, love, grace, whatever you want to call it, to this mother, to show Christ's love through deeds in taking this son to soccer practice. Sometimes the best evangelism can be through deeds of kindness, deeds with the intention of loving lavishly. Love without expecting anything in return. Maybe through our deeds, people experience an all-loving God who is for all and wants all to know the life-changing love, this life-changing love. Here's a question for us all this week, is how can you show Christ's love to a neighbour, friend or family member without saying any words? How can you show Christ's love to a neighbour, family member or friend in a practical way this week? Evangelism in the Western world is crying out for the generations to connect, the generations to share the praiseworthy deeds of the Father and to proclaim and demonstrate that generation from generation. Because evangelism takes all generations. This emerging generation need the older generation to pass on the good news of Jesus Christ. Sure, God can use a young person to lead another young person to Jesus. However, there's something significant in the older generation passing down the praiseworthy deeds of God to those who don't yet believe. I believe it says something about it in the Bible, right? About passing down the praiseworthy deeds of the Father. Their consecrated life, this older generation, can be seen as a trophy of God's grace and redemption. Nicky Gumbel, who's a famous minister based in the UK, a key part of innovating the Alpha program globally, and an amazing man of God, an evangelist really, and teacher on evangelism and leading people to Jesus, speaks of the importance of sharing the life-changing message of Jesus from one generation to another. He also makes us aware that now in the 21st century, one of the greatest stumbling blocks is that non-Christians can't fathom Jesus as the personal Savior. The common question of why does God let bad things happen to good people, as well as many other questions, have become stumbling blocks in this 21st century generation. Carl Fay is another minister in Australia and author involved in the media, has created another great series called The Belief Blockers. It talks about these stumbling blocks, or belief blockers, if you want to call it, like Carl Fay calls it, these things that are blocking this generation from coming into a relationship with Jesus. Things like, why do bad things happen to good people, but also things like, surrounded around death and abuse and all these hard things that are hard to answer are becoming more and more blockages for people to understand and come into an understanding and relationship with Jesus. It's also interesting to see the increasing rate of families that are not operating as a complete family unit in the Western world. Parents are looking for older role models to positively invest in the lives of their children. And we see this through those Big Daddy programs and programs where they want older people to influence their child or younger person. A study by Brigham Young University, researchers find that involvement in everyday activities such as eating dinner together, watching TV, playing in the yard, and playing video games are even more important to share with dad than big outings or trips or activities or so forth. Fathers and youths in the study done by the university, experienced more satisfaction and cohesion in their family when fathers were involved in everyday core activities. Although participation in balanced family leisure activities is important and needed, it was fathers' involvement in the everyday home-based common family leisure activities that held more weight than the large extravagant out of the ordinary types of activities when examining family functioning. We look at this idea of the crave of the normal, and with an increasing fatherless generation, especially in the Western world, this is such an opportunity for the church to step into this space and offer unconditional loving spaces where young people feel valued, worthy, and has spoken over them the truths of who they are in Christ. Evangelism to the younger generation does not have to look like the same generation reaching out and evangelizing to the same generation. The classic picture, I guess, of a youth pastor in tight, skinny jeans and the latest haircut reaching out to the young people in a relevant way isn't always the most effective of reaching the younger generation. I remember as a young youth pastor looking on and admiring this elderly couple who were the ministers of a Salvation Army Corps in Western Sydney. And it was really an older dying congregation, you could say. This older couple by no means looked like they would be able to relate to the younger generation. However, God used this elderly couple to lead over 20 plus young people into a transformative relationship with Jesus Christ. And this is simply what they did. Through the parents connecting to their core through the welfare program the Salvation Army offers. They invited through the parents, they invited the young people to a youth gathering on a Friday night that they would start. They asked the young people who came, if you were to come every Friday night to this space, what would you want to do? And who can help us in leading that? And how can we help you in being the best young person you can be in your school and in your home. This is the part I love. They love these kids unconditionally. They empowered them, they believed in them, they sowed into their lives both financially and with time. They continually prayed for them. They would attend their school presentations when mom or dad were too drunk or uninterested in them. They would encourage them with their musical skills and abilities, even when it was painful to their ears. They would cook them a healthy meal every Friday night. They would teach disciplines in a healthy way. They practically showed the love of Christ to these kids until one by one, each young person came into a vibrant relationship with Jesus. You know, as we look at the need for evangelism in the West, I believe we can learn so much from this elderly couple. No matter how old you are, no matter how irrelevant you may think you are, no matter how unqualified you think you may be, there's something you can do to show Christ love, the love of Christ to the next generation. And by your words and deeds, evangelize to others. Here's a question. Who is an older person that has shown Christ's love through both word or deed or one or the other? Who's an older person that's shown Christ's love to you? And what was it about that person that was so different to other older people around you? And looking at evangelism in the West, there's one more point I want to cover in this talk, and that is the stories of Jesus. With more questions and stumbling blocks, as talked about earlier, there's belief blockers to this Western generation. Some would say that now more than ever, it is important that we evangelize and communicate the good news of Jesus Christ in such a creative way that it would leave people with a taste of wanting more of Jesus. It's almost like we become dripping these stories, these creative ways of communicating the good stories of Jesus. Christine Dillon, in her book Telling the Gospel Through Stories, speaks about the importance of reaching out to those who don't yet know Jesus with the stories of the gospel. 2/3 of the Bible, she says, is considered to be story. And Dillon proposes that although non-believers may not be happy to believe in God yet, they are usually happy to listen to the stories of the Bible, in the sharing of these stories throughout the Bible. And it leaves the non-believer in a place where they want to know the transformative story of Christ more. Whilst the Western world have not always been effective in reaching non-believers with the good news of Jesus Christ, we can see believers are beginning to recognize this error, and a growing desire to become bolder in proclaiming the good news of Jesus Christ is growing. Through words and deeds from one generation to another, or even through the stories of Jesus in the Bible, creatively sharing those. It is vital for the Western church to continue to evangelize, to reach out, to proclaim and demonstrate through word, through deed, to people in this Western society. They're in need of this good news that is in Jesus. They're in need of this hope. They're in need of this grace and love that is for all in this current day. There's a spirit of despair, a spirit of hopelessness in our communities. And now more than ever, the church needs to rise up to proclaim and demonstrate this good news of Jesus Christ.